Good morning. Thank you all so much for letting me be here and the opportunity to speak to you about this topic. And just to brave it with me, I was telling them I generally prefer to be on the other side of the screen, and that's why I counsel clients who are typically on the camera, not me. So public speaking, court, that's not my thing. So thank you for just allowing me the opportunity to have this conversation with you. I hope it's a conversation. If there are questions that come up, just jot them down and we'll have an opportunity to answer those at the end. Or if there's a burning question that you just can't wait on, feel free to let me know too. But she gave a little background about me, and thank you so much for the introduction. And I know it sounds like a wide range of things and kind of all over the place, and I definitely took the winding road to get to where I am. Didn't really plan on doing this, didn't know this. I don't think this was even a thing when I was in college. So, I think we've all seen how careers in this area have grown and just come to exist. But originally I was a journalism, advertising, and communication major. I switched my major 4 times in college, but all in that realm. And I did some journalism as an intern. And after college, I went home to Rogersville, where I'm from, and I was the director of the Main Street program, which was a partnership with the Chamber of Commerce there. And I ended up working with small business owners there and leaders in economic development all over the state. Learned a lot about that, learned a lot about real estate at the same time. I worked for AmeriCorps also during that time, so I just learned a lot about community engagement and really developing the community from the ground up by educating people and finding out what works and bringing knowledge that would help lift everyone up. So in a roundabout way, I guess that's how I ended up here today. I went to law school, fell into real estate shortly after law school, and I really enjoyed that, so I do have a real estate background, but inevitably I ended up working with a lot of business owners who bought real estate. Also just loved intellectual property from my journalism, advertising background, and did a lot of that pro bono, and then slowly got clients that I would work with as well. And I just really enjoyed that so much that at some point I decided to put my focus on that. And really, this is a difficult topic to cover today, so we're just going to kind of run through. It's kind of like in high school where they take you to Europe and you see like 5 countries all at one time. That's going to be this presentation, because really you could honestly do a presentation on every single one of these topics for an entire hour or an hour and a half. But I say that to say that it's interesting how all the things that have brought me here have been super helpful to my clients, because you generally need a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and they all kind of overlap. And I'm the first to tell clients, hey, that's not something I can tell you the answer to right now. I need to get back to you on that, or maybe you need some expertise in this area. But generally speaking, I think for any business, really, when you get to a certain level of success, that you need intellectual property counsel, you have some real estate considerations possibly, and you definitely need business and contracts. So it all does kind of mesh together. So luckily I have a little bit of background in each, and I found out I enjoyed that. It makes my client base very diverse. I'm excited to be here because most people don't know that I left my firm about 3 years ago. I've been an attorney for 11 years, and I'm learning myself the struggles and the joys, the ups and downs of owning my own business, and I feel like that has been very eye-opening and good for personal growth, but it's also allowed me to help clients even better, because I deeply personally understand the struggles that they go through and have now that I'm doing it all myself. And I'm not just like watching from the outside. So it's been interesting, but I haven't done a great job of putting myself out there. So thank you for just allowing me to be here, and I hope that you take some value out of this. And anything I don't answer, I'm happy to follow up with after the presentation. But let's dive in. So that was just a kind of some background, but today my hope is to kind of give you an overview of social media law and compliance, and then some key legal considerations that are involved with social media marketing, the FTC guidelines on advertising and endorsements, Disclosures, that's still related to the FTC and generally regulated by them, as well as some other organizations and regulatory bodies, but we're going to focus on the FTC today. We're going to talk briefly about some AI, some emerging technology, and how that does impact you as a business and considerations to think about going forward. Intellectual property, we're going to touch on that just because you have to know a little bit about that just to even know the risks involved and what you need to be thinking about when you do your own marketing or when you outsource that to, really an influencer, any kind of brand partner. And then to wrap it up, I'm going to touch on creating a social media policy for your business, and that goes for the company as well as employees. And again, we're just going to kind of touch on the umbrella view, the big picture view, and I'm going to get into details as much as I can, but I also want this to be helpful to you, so I want to leave time to try to answer your questions on those specific areas in the ones that will help you most. So, okay. So social media has obviously become a huge part of marketing and is become relevant for pretty much every business. I mean, even I have a Instagram page and I don't update it nearly enough because I understand now that it's challenging as a business owner to run the business, do all the things, do what your business is focused on, and then also be a social media whiz or even have the mental capacity to have that. I mean, some people love it, and that's great. And I think the other side of the coin is it has allowed people to show up in ways that they never could before and to connect with their customers and their clients in ways that they weren't able to possibly before, and really build a following and a loyalty to your brand because they feel like they know you as a person, which is awesome. The flip side of that coin is there's many more things to think about in terms of legal compliance and all the other things that come with, the extra work, time, and effort, and just your brand's reputation and how that can be shaped by your social media and also just be considerations as you're doing it, as you outsource it again, as your employees participate in social media, whether that is through your company or whether that is through their own social media accounts, and what you can kind of do to rein that in and at least have a little bit more control and direction over the way that that's put out in the world and manage the things that I guess you can control. And to some extent you can't. And I think that's another thing to remember is you can't control all the things. That is the beauty of social media. That is the beauty of the internet. The beauty and the burden, the blessing and the curse is that it allows way more connectivity, way more speech, way more opinions out there than ever before, good and bad. And so to think that you can control the narrative, I feel like is an exhausting exercise. So I do just remind you to focus on the things that you can control the most and that are the important things to your business. And honestly, I tell people, some people are better at one platform than another. Some people really like, short form content and are good on TikTok. Some people like written stuff. They're really great on Twitter. Some people have, great graphic design and they are able to make Facebook ads. Focus on the platforms that you feel like that you are most effective in. And, you don't have to do them all at once, but you do want to have some plan in place to at least monitor the others for things that mention your business that could potentially confuse people about your business, or just have some kind of working knowledge so that you can keep up with what you're supposed to be doing along the way for when you decide that you actually do want to use that platform. So again, why is compliance critical? Not only is it beneficial for your business to learn these things, but there are also risks involved, and the bigger you are and the more revenue you have and the more visible you are, but that's not necessarily indicative. The more you are on the FTC's radar, and there are other regulatory bodies, there's state law, there's national advertising boards, there's all kinds of things, but the FTC is kind of the one we're going to focus on, the one that you can have monetary fines and is the one that's kind of stepped up in this age of social media to try to create some kind of uniform guidelines for everyone. So that's the only reason again, it would be a lot to go into all the different things, but I mean, part of it is just operate ethically and think about your business practices and the relationships that you want to develop with your clients, but also if you're going to look somewhere for any kind of guideposts, the FTC is where you want to look. And also the one you want to look to not pay money or get letters and get any kind of consequences, I guess. And again, going back to just be a good business, consider what you want to be said about your business by your customers in the community, because I feel like some of it is, the FTC is not going to be able to monitor everything, every platform, everybody. And so at the end of the day, it really is, you still want to be able to build trust with your customers and ensure them that you're showing up in the same way every single time to the extent possible, and that they know what to expect from you and you know what to expect from them, and that the feeling they get to know you as a brand remains consistent, and that they don't feel misled or deceived, or that suddenly, I have to think about this all the time because sometimes I post personal things on it's usually like my dog. I have a golden retriever and she comes to work with me, but still, it is still about messaging and, what those messages say and how those could be received. And is that aligned with your brand? Not necessarily good or bad, but just from the consumer standpoint, how will that be received and what will that cause them to think about your business? So going back to the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, that's the primary body that regulates these things currently. And they kind of got their knees taken out from under them in recent years for a bit as far as the enforcement tactics that they had been using. And so they went back into their cave and they essentially said, hey, the world is changing. These prior rules that we had, these prior enforcement methods, they aren't working anymore. And we've been limited in a lot of ways by the court system. So now we're going to use other techniques that we have more authority without some other body's intervention, or without them being able to limit what the FTC's enforcement and consequences are. And so now that they've decided to do that, as well as the fact that I think there is growing concern about people's privacy, children being exposed to things online, just the constant access that people have, children or not children, and how unhealthy that is if it's not regulated to some extent. However, they also want to allow people the creativity and the freedom of speech and the ability to continue to use those however they want to the greatest extent possible that's beneficial. So it's been kind of a balancing act, but they have really cracked down on certain areas in the last, 5 years. And I think that we're only going to continue to see them get more hardcore and continue to put more strict guidelines in. For example, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but the disclosure guidelines for most advertisements on platforms have not been revised since 2013. So just think about how much the world and social media has changed since 2013. That's when I graduated from law school. Again, I'm pretty sure we had some intellectual property classes, but we didn't have any classes about this. I actually, when I left my firm, I took some online classes through NYU just to brush up on really the world and how it had changed, and just concepts and having practical application, having a professor work through those case studies, and because even though I had encountered some of those things in the real world, to have somebody who is an expert in that area, in a whole area that didn't even exist really 10 years ago, was helpful and interesting, and he's a great resource. But that's all just to say the FTC's guidelines clearly are outdated and not really doing their job. So they have been trying to rework those. They've put several revisions of different things up for public comment. I think those will be released and again, we'll go into that as far as the specifics, but I think that those, you will see those released in coming years. But I think, again, even the landscape changes day by day. I mean, I had some clients recently that are 20-year-olds who they explained to me what a server was on Discord, and they play Grand Theft Auto and they monetize it, and like they make $2,000+ like a year. And but I was like, before I can help you, you have to tell me, how does this work exactly? You know, like I can help you with the legal stuff, but like tell me, you know, just explain the tech. And I feel like I'm pretty techie. So I mean, I think no matter how quickly, it's still a government body that has procedures and processes, and it's a good thing that they want public comment, but really anything that they do always has a lag time. So I mean, I think we'll see some of the issues addressed in the future very soon, but I still think there's going to be ways to continue to get around that. And so it's just, if it's like, what is that whack-a-mole game where you tackle one issue, then you tackle another. But to that point, I think one of the main things that they are focused on in coming years, they're called dark patterns. And it sounds like a Harry Potter like book or something crazy, but really what it means is just essentially deceptive practices, and there's a list of them, but deceptive practices that don't pass the smell test. That like if you as a consumer, you know, who are a reasonable person were to encounter these, you could very easily be deceived by them, misled by them, especially when it comes to certain high-risk areas like guns, drugs, sexual products, just gambling, sports gambling, anything that has like that element of, I don't know, excitement or element of danger and risk. They are very much focused on, and the age appropriateness, and there are other organizations working, you know, with them on that. But just also generally speaking, I think because the guidelines are so old that they have focused on this, and they released a report in 2002 that essentially covered a number of different things that said these things are able to go on because our guidelines are so old. And even if you're, you know, meeting the letter of the law as far as the guidelines back in 2013, holistically looking at it, what you're doing is deceptive. Like it's pretty obvious that you intended to deceive the consumer or mislead them, or to, you know, maybe not be completely straightforward. And so I think, you know, they're cracking down and saying just because maybe you're able to point to this and can come up with a loophole, that doesn't mean that you're complying, and we're cracking down. So some of the things that they are looking at are design elements that induce a false belief, that create a misleading impression. For example, the countdown clocks. Sometimes when you buy things, you see like, oh, blah, blah, blah has bought this in Atlanta, Georgia. No, there's only 2 of these items left. Or we have a sale going on for the next 13 hours. But really, that's not true. They just reset the clock like every day. So that's an example of something that is a misleading thing, a design element that creates a sense of pressure that is not maybe inherently wrong, but the intent behind it is not genuine and not up and up. Another one is design elements that delay the disclosure of material facts or fees, where if you have to click on a thing, the fees are hidden, or they're in tiny print. And if you've noticed, I don't know if you buy tickets for different things, but a lot of the ticket things and hotel bookings, they now have to show an option where they have the full price included with all of the fees. That's because of the FTC cracking down on that, and they still have a ways to go, but it's things like that where essentially they're like hiding the ball, and you may or may not, as a reasonable consumer, get around to seeing that even if you're pretty diligent. Other things are design elements that lead to unauthorized charges where you get a free trial and maybe it's in fine print that you have to like cancel at a certain time, or even if you do cancel, it's really difficult, or you try to cancel. If you intend to like go on there, I mean, I recently was like, I'm going to sign up for this and then I'm going to immediately cancel. So I'll remember to do it and I won't forget. And like, I had to look all over their website. And then it was like, call this number and talk to a customer service rep who probably I would have no record of. And I mean, so they've said, none of that. Does it still go on? Absolutely. But they're cracking down on that, and they're saying it should just be as easy to cancel as it is to sign up. And there shouldn't be any hidden aspects of it. You shouldn't have to click on a million different links or call somebody. It should be very obvious how to cancel if you don't want to, and very obvious that like once your free trial is over, you pay X amount of dollars. So, and just a couple examples, and I don't want to focus on this too much, but they sued Credit Karma for having dark patterns and misrepresenting that people were pre-approved for credit cards or their own card, and which caused people to have their credit checked, which obviously is not great for your credit sometimes, or if you're not expecting it, especially if you were pre-approved. It wasted their time, they got their data, all of that when they weren't really pre-approved, and so there was a $3 million settlement for that.
How much?
$3 million.
Wow.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think they have focused on some of the...
Credit Karma stop.
Say what?
Will they stop? They continue to do it.
No, that's the tough part is I think that the FTC has really focused their efforts on some of the repeat offenders and the bigger names to make a point. But yes, it is challenging because it's like if they have enough money, they'll stop doing that maybe, but they'll do some other thing. So I do think it will take, some kind of, because right now it's kind of a fact-based allegation because they're like dark patterns. They release this report and it's more of a compilation of things that say like you're not being on the up and up, you're being deceptive, versus like a clear-cut guideline that they can point to and say, this is our rule, you violated it. So also the enforcement and the going after them and the entire process of holding them accountable takes way longer. So that's why it's generally only worth their time at this point to go after the bigger names. However, in the background, they're working on creating a cohesive set of rules that will apply to everybody. These are just kind of some, foreshadowing for what we're probably going to see to come. There was another settlement for Fare Portal. It was similar to what I talked about the time clock and how many tickets are left, and said, blah, blah, blah. People are looking at the fare, book yours now before it's gone. And that one was a $2.6 million settlement. So not only can you have to pay a lot of money, but at the end of the day, I mean, no one wants to be these businesses that are in the news, that have these settlements, because, you would hope, at least, that if you were a customer of these businesses, that you would no longer be after that happened. And so, point being, not only is it money, but it also erodes consumer trust in your brand. And I think that's the other point of making it so public is the hope is that enough people hear this and they say, maybe I'll think twice about seeking, credit monitoring services through Credit Karma or whatever, because they've done this before. That shows me a little bit about them as a company. Why would I want to take the chance that it would do? But even on a smaller level, I think, we've all had. This happens. I try my very hardest as an attorney because I know attorneys get a very bad name, and probably deservedly so in some ways, about about their fees and the bait and switch, or how many of us have signed up for one thing thinking it's this price, and then you find out, oh, there's all these add-ons, or actually there's going to be this and this and this. And I mean, maybe you pay at that time. And I've worked with a couple people, no names of course, but that was how they operated, and they got paid, but they never worked with that person again. Because who wants to go back to a business that doesn't respect you enough? And I mean, there's always misunderstandings, there's always people that you're just not on the same page, but for the most part, I mean, as a business, it serves you also to be completely straightforward and make sure that you can be as transparent as possible, and to earn that trust and not lose it. Because what is the statistic about how many hours it takes to get, or the percentage it takes to get a new client versus a repeat client? A repeat client is way, way easier, especially if you've already built a relationship with them. Why would you want to burn it by being deceptive or misleading in any way? So, I mean, along with not paying a $3 million settlement, which none of you want, I'm sure, it really comes down to, do you want to maintain the trust of your clients and your customers that you've worked hard to build all this through all the other things that you do and the time that you spent with them, and just word of mouth as well. Referral, right? Yeah. So I mean, again, it goes back to, what are your ethics as a business? Who do you want to show up as in the community? I think all of these things, we don't have clear-cut guidelines, but a lot of it boils down to do unto others, and, how do you want your name to be heard and thought of? And if you feel like something is sketchy, then it's probably not kosher with the FTC. I mean, and again, they don't have the time and energy and resources to go after everybody, but I think when they put some rules in place, it will be much easier, and there will be some clear cut, if you do this, then this. And until then, it's kind of the Wild West, and there's a lot of gray area. But I say, like, to be mindful, and if you are doing any of these things, even if you don't mean to be deceptive, to just reconsider how that's going to play out in the future, and maybe start changing your business practices. So another couple things that they are focused on are just misleading advertising and misleading claims, and who's making those, and the authority they have to make those, the expertise they have to make those, as well as just claims that need to be substantiated somehow. A couple areas that come to mind are health products, supplements, like homeopathic drugs, any kind of beauty, anything where, the result is somewhat subjective, and there's not maybe a regulatory agency that has authority over those, as long as you're not blatantly violating, the FDA rules or, something like that. But they do say that when you have people making those claims, they have to be substantiated somehow. A couple other areas they are focusing on, other than kind of like the beauty health industry, are environmental claims, because that's kind of become really popular in the last 10 years or whatever, to claim that you're sustainable or green or biodegradable. And they actually have defined guidelines for those words, and they have to be specific, and they have to be backed by evidence, and they have to meet a strict criteria for you to supposed to be allowed to say those in your advertising. Another one that's pretty relevant is Made in USA. They have cracked down on that, because I think a lot of people say Made in the USA, but they have outsourced all the other stuff, and maybe the final product is put together in the USA. And there's no bright line as far as how much of it has to be put together in the USA and before you reach that threshold. But I think there are some cases where they have, gone after people where it's pretty clear that, like, it's only the very, very last step is the USA assembly. And I just, I think that sounds good. And that is, I can see why people want to do it, but again, it's just examining, can you substantiate that? What percentage of that process is what you say it is? Same thing as health claims. What percentage of what you're saying is actually valid, certifiably true, factually based? You have some way of proving. And I think some of that, there's always amount of like speculation, varies from customer to customer as far as result may vary. But you have to have at least a pretty good basis to be able to use that in your marketing and to highlight that feature. So I think I might have gotten off. Okay. So yeah, back to what I was saying about the disclosure guidelines. And this is not just disclosure, this is a lot of the rules. But the last thing that was published was called the .com disclosure guidelines. And they were revised last in 2013. And they're currently, again, supposed to release more in the maybe next couple of years. But clearly those are not adequate to address what's going on in the world now. But there are some, clear things that even in recent years, they're like, this is not good. This is, even if our rules don't say it specifically, and that's why they said they were revising things, it's because they were saying companies are citing these rules, saying, oh, we're following the letter of the law, this is okay under blah, 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 but the FTC's like, no, like that doesn't reach, just like the level of reasonable ethics, doesn't, a normal person, a normal consumer would not feel like that's okay. And a couple of those big things are hidden terms and conditions, and inadequate disclosures, and hidden disclosures, and not just about, like we talked about before, where you're intending to mislead, but I think the line has blurred more than ever now about what is an endorsement and what's a brand partner, and are you being paid to use this product, and are you, or are they giving you free product, or do you just happen to like the product? Because so many people nowadays put their lives on social media as influencers, and it's a blend of things that they are being paid very much to push and endorse and advertise, and then some of it is just things that are in their lives that they happen to like. And so the FTC is very concerned about people being able to tell the difference between those things, and having it clear, concise, upfront, not like on Instagram, like below the dots, but like readable within the first couple words that this is an ad, that this is sponsored, paid ad, paid post. I think people tend to use something like brand partner, collab, because it sounds a little bit less, like pushy maybe, or it sounds a little bit more organic. Mm-hmm. But, and maybe brand partner would work. It really depends, again, on what an average reasonable consumer would think about it and what they would take away from it. And do they recognize it's an ad? Do they recognize, if it's somebody that they have made many posts before, and like I listened to a podcast that she has about 3 partners that she works with that she always does commercials with, and it's in every podcast that they sponsor all of her episodes. So, if she's put that out there, and maybe on one of her posts she puts brand partner, that's a little bit less deceptive, because there's a million other posts that are very clear that she is being paid and working with this company as, a rep, or as a partner who's getting some kind of monetary exchange, versus, if it's a one-off post where somebody put partner, well, partner in what? Like business partner, like your friend, like your, like that. Partner in crime, exactly. Well, but that's exactly the point, because from an average consumer's point of view, if that's the only post and you're just reading it, taking it at face value, are you able to tell that somebody is receiving some kind of incentive or monetary exchange or really any kind of benefit in exchange for posting that. And so they've really cracked down on, where it's placed, the words that are used, and also like considering the type of platform it is and the, what's the word? Like how big it is, how small it is. Maybe like the font size. Are you going to see a tiny like 8-point font hashtag if you are on your smartphone versus like if you're watching on your laptop on a YouTube video, or maybe you're watching a YouTube video on your phone? All these things they've said, even if it's adequate in one means and in one method of consumption, you have to consider it across the board because people are viewing it in a variety of ways. And, that 8-point font is not going to show up adequately if you're on your tiny smartphone. So I think, they are really looking at, did you try to make it obvious? Did you try to make it unavoidable, unmissable, and super clear about what was trying to be said? I think I got ahead of myself, but a couple examples of that, not maybe the ad, but the FTC sued a business called the Lending Club, and they had no hidden fees on their advertisement, and then there were fees if you clicked a tiny little question mark next to like one of the things. So like they weren't hidden, but they definitely weren't on the page that you were on unless you sought them out. So they sued them for $18 million. So, because that's pretty, don't know about that. Lending Club, somebody Google it and see. But and I feel like that was especially egregious because it's a lender, it's a financial institution that people are trusting. That's, above and beyond just regular advertising where you should have transparency and trust, but clearly didn't. But again, just because you have it somewhere on there, whether it's small font or whether you have to hover over it, the FTC is saying that's not adequate anymore. Another one is Frontier Communications, and this was about internet speeds, but they just said they advertised one internet speed, and in the tiny print, I guess, and you hear sometimes radio ads where they read really fast. None of that is adequate. They're like, if we can't see it, understand what it's saying, if we are not holistically considering it with the other text and part of the advertisement, it's not good enough because we're not expecting a reasonable consumer to, like people are busy. They got stuff, like they got to live their lives. Like nobody's going to read over every single document and every single ad in the fine print. Even lawyers, like, what's that? Ain't nobody got time for that. Because and you shouldn't have to, I guess is their point. Their point is, the burden should not be on the consumer to have to do Nancy Drew every time they consume a product or they, borrow from a lender. There should be some expectation that the person who's benefiting by selling these services is being transparent and honest and forthcoming. Can I pause and get a water really quick? Sorry, I feel like I'm going to choke. Sorry, guys.
I have a question.
Sure.
Does this guideline also,
Thank you so much.
in regards to
Thank you.
the consumer walks in my place and because I'm giving them something, I ask them to do a Google review for me or like me on Facebook? Is that similar?
We're getting to that, but yes, that's a good question. That's a really good question.
Because that's the only thing I know how to do.
No,
So I'm going to try to do it today.
it's a good question. Yeah, no,
I'm here.
it's a great question.
Facebook since 2016, 4 months.
No, it's a great question. And honestly, some of these things have been interesting for me to learn because, again, as I navigate having my own business and I think about all the different ways to put myself out there and what's most effective, what's most available, what is allowed, then I've had to refresh myself on some of these things because, and I also think that you see what you're supposed to do And then I also think that it's a couple things. Nobody's enforcing it, or not nobody. The FTC, again, is limited in their ability to enforce it other than some of the big names, and or it's just very random. So there's plenty of people who are not going by these guidelines and benefiting from it. Along with that, I mean, sometimes the setup of what you're able to do and the options that you have through some of these platforms, you're only able to have a certain word count, or to, like, you don't get to choose what rankings show up at the top. Or so, I mean, some of it is limited because you're limited by the way the technology works, and you don't have control over some of these things.
Because nobody at Google picks up the phone.
Right, exactly. And I will touch on that, and many other places, speaking of reviews and the challenges of getting those down, getting those dealt with. But yes, that is next in like 2 slides forward. So good question. And so, yeah, just I think before we get to that, just wanted to touch on one more thing about influencers and when you contract with other people as a business, and it's not you necessarily in the advertisement or somebody or an employee, you're responsible for making sure that they comply. And honestly, I represent a lot of people on the other side of things, and I always try to take that out because I feel like it's not as the influencer, like, you don't really have a lot of bargaining power in that. You do and you don't, but you don't have a ton of bargaining power in some transactions. The brand just tells you what they want and you do it. But I think there is a responsibility on both sides to be aware of what you should be doing and to recognize that you could be held accountable by the FTC or any other enforcement body for not disclosing certain things and disclosing it's an ad, or being held liable for misrepresentation. And generally it falls on the business side because they're the ones that are profiting more, and they're the ones that are seen as kind of exploitative, and they're the ones that have the power dynamic as well as probably more of the money than some of these. And I say that, but there's plenty of influencers who are making way more than me, and it makes me wonder what I did with my life. But I mean, in many transactions, the business is the one that's going to take the fall if compliance hasn't happened and the FTC zeroes in on it, because you're really the one that has control over the content at the end of the day. That's not always true, because sometimes people post on their own pages, but it's still, again, on you to either put that in the contract and have some kind of approval process, or to make sure that that is thought of, considered, or that you're willing to take the risk. But it generally is up to both parties to try to comply, but again, more on the side of the business. And that even goes for your employees, actually. I know I said your employees and you, but even if your employee is somebody that's featured in your advertising, if they have received some kind of benefit from that, or not even a benefit, but like they have a material connection to your business, obviously they benefit in a roundabout way, whether it's like a TikTok or whether it's just like a, hey, like, I don't know, a tweet that's like, or what is it called, an X now, or a thread, I don't even know what it's called, like, but some comment that like, hey, I got my hair done at blah, blah, blah today, or love my job, love these ladies and they do a great job at blah, blah, blah. Like, if it's not obvious that you work there, then, and it could possibly seem like a random post from a random customer, like, you're supposed to disclose that you're an employee, or it to be discernible somehow by your profile, be fairly obvious that like it's not just a unconnected opinion that's the random person that's giving this testimonial. So, social media reviews and testimonials. I was gonna say I don't want to do it while she's gone. we'll circle back though. And so just reiterating, it's kind of the same as everything else really, as far as honesty, disclosure, actually being what, you say it is. But a couple of big points are they really need to have used the service they say they used. It needs to disclose if they, like I know sometimes we'll see Amazon reviews or whatever and it'll say verified purchase. That's just a way to say this person has actually used this product. It's not just a friend. And I mean, like, I'm sure there are plenty of people who have started a business who were like, hey, can you give me a great review? And don't blame you, but I mean, under the FTC's guidelines, you're supposed to only get reviews from the people that have used your product and service and can attest to it honestly, whether that's good or bad. And the fact that you allow them to say good and bad things does not make it better or worse or absolve you from disclosing if they have some kind of connection or if you've given them incentives or that you've paid them. Because I know some services do kind of incentivize, ones where they've gotten something in return for giving the review. And I know like when I order Amazon stuff, sometimes I'll get like a little note that says, hey, if you give us 5 stars and write a review, then we'll give you a $10 gift card. That is definitely not allowed. Or maybe it is, but they have to disclose it. They have to disclose you actually received the product and we gave you an incentive in return that you're not just doing this of your own free will because you love this, and maybe you do love it, but we prompted you to do it. And again, I mean, many people are not doing this, and again, many of us don't have control over how the reviews show up or which ones get prioritized. Sure.
Can you do that and you don't say for a good review, you just say, can you fill out a review and we'll give you?
Either way. So just because you don't tell them how to give the review, you're still supposed to disclose that you gave them an incentive in return for just taking the time to do a review. But the problem is, like, how do you do that on some platforms? Like, you don't, like, there's no way to, like, differentiate. So, but in a perfect world, yes, if there's some way to make a distinction between people that have randomly woken up and decided to go and review you good and bad versus people that you've asked, then you're supposed to make the distinction. But you're limited by how much you can do. So, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Sure.
Does the FTC have actual definitions for endorsements, testimonials, reviews, kind of all those things, incentives as well?
No.
Okay.
And so, and I think that's some of what they're working on because it really is kind of a hide the ball situation. But based on their enforcement actions, I mean, it's usually a combination of things. It's usually a combination of violations and maybe some misleading or unfair deceptive tactics. But as far as what is considered material versus voluntary, it's kind of a sliding scale, and they don't really define it. They let you find out when they send you a notice of enforcement. So, yeah. So I mean, again, in a perfect world where you did have control over the ability to make some of these distinctions, they would prefer that any kind of incentive at all or, non-arm's length connection was disclosed. But again, how do you do that when you don't have control over some of the platforms? But I think when you're giving a testimonial on your your website or using a testimonial on your Instagram or something like that, where I've had clients that put a testimonial, with their picture or whatever of some of their clients, like the words, and made a post. You're supposed to put a little star or something that says, this person was asked to give this or given a discount or whatever, or put it in the body of your post, to where it's, fairly discernible that, again, you're not, and also their consent. That's another thing too. I don't think that's on there, but make sure, I always have to get consent because of confidentiality rules, but even if you're a business where you don't have to get consent from your clients and customers, and I would toe that line very carefully, because what you think is maybe public information may involve health information, privacy information that you might not have thought would be like something that be a problem to be out there, but if it involves their home address or their location or whatever, regardless, you want to get their consent. If you're going to make them if you're going to monetize their words, even if it's just a, hey, I would get in writing, even if it was just a text or an email, but at least ask them and say, hey, can I, feature you? Because if you're making money off of it in some way and they have a problem with it being out there, or they wake up and decide they don't want their name and picture, because I don't know, that maybe they want to join the Secret Service protection, whatever it is. Maybe they don't want their face and name out there in the world anymore. You want to make sure it's okay with them and have some kind of proof if you're going to feature it pretty prominently in your advertising. Any questions about that? And also, they're definitely cracking down on not only paying for higher rankings on review sites and bots. There were some guidelines that came out pretty recently about buying accounts and followers, and how, along with the platforms picking up on that and bumping you down in the algorithm, the FTC has come out and said, that's not okay. And how they tell, again, that's, I guess they would have to take that up with the platforms and do some digging. But I think there's some pretty obvious accounts when you go from 100 followers to 100,000 in a week or whatever. And so they're just saying, we are keeping an eye on that, and we recognize that's a problem, and gives an unfair advantage, and is still deceptive, because it makes people think that you have the confidence of all of your clients that are followers or whatever, when really you've only been in business for a day. So that's just, again, not an accurate representation of your business and the length of time and the people that know and trust you. So you aren't responsible for old posts as long as you don't continue to promote them. So, because I think the FTC has realized that maybe their guidance hasn't been super clear and super updated in a lot of years, and there is some leeway for older posts. You don't have to go back through your timeline if you've been in business for a long time and didn't meet these guidelines, didn't come anywhere close, because I think only now in the last few years have they really said, this is a priority. We see that this has been a problem, but it is definitely going to continue to be a problem, and we're putting out some definitive, we're going after people to make examples. But until then, it was kind of the Wild West. And so they're just saying, we're not going to force you to go back and delete a bunch of your content that people engaged with, that you've built, that you created, just to meet these guidelines now. As long as you're not pinning it at the top, you're not continuing to use it prominently, that it's just kind of down on your socials. Also, experts that say, I'm a doctor. Well, I'm a doctor of jurisprudence, but I could not go on and, under the FTC guidelines, say I'm a doctor and endorse some health product in an ad. That happens fairly often. So, they're saying your experts need to be an expert in, obviously there's a range of reasonableness, but, your expert needs to be, if you have an expert and you're going to use them in advertising as an expert and use that edge, I guess, then they need to be qualified in the field and the area that you're claiming that they are giving their expert opinion on. Also, I never even had thought of this, but AI people, AI models, those are becoming more and more popular because it's generally cheaper. Probably you can get them to look nicer and like takes way less takes as far as videos. If you're good at AI, to just create fake people, and it's also easy to get them to say exactly what you want them to say for your brand. So you can do that to an extent as long as they are not making a claim or assertion. If you have them in the background of a photo, if they are, context, but if they are not a real person and they are somehow representing that they are and that they've used your product, that's a no-go, and you have to disclose regardless that there is AI. Like I know on a lot of platforms now, it'll suggest like, is this AI content? Even if it's just like a picture or, some kind of clip or a background of I know I was watching some seminar recently, and it was talking about deceptive practices of this one business, and they had created like an office building that was supposedly theirs, and they'd used it on several of their sites, and it was like a blend of Chicago and some other places, but it was AI, and it was like a very fancy office building, and it made them look, very legit. And that was wrong for multiple reasons. They had a lot of stuff going on, but the least of those being that it was AI generated, but you're supposed to disclose that it is AI if you use it in any kind of involvement with your advertising.
I have a question.
Sure.
Just coming back a little bit, you spoke about the timeline on if somebody posted something and that they can be held responsible for the post, but just not to repost it to make it more current.
Right.
Is there a time frame from like a year, so to speak, like 2013, anything prior to that is fine, or is it just as things are passing, as long as it's behind when they pass it?
Yeah.
How does that work?
I don't think there's a clear-cut guideline either, but I think it's, I think it's challenging until the last few years where they've really amped up the enforcement to really say that they've been a stickler for these things, because it has been such a gray area that I think it's mostly, it's for both sides. I think it's to say, we're going to give you some grace because we clearly didn't know the position that we would be in at this point in time and how technology would evolve. And maybe we weren't prepared to enforce that through our old enforcement means, and just the guidelines don't address that even. But also, I feel like if it's certain issues that they've made a point to go after in the last couple years, and you've blatantly continued to do it, I think the main time you need to worry is generally they will give you some kind of notice first. Like if you're on their radar, or if you're doing something that's blatantly caught their attention, or that you've continued to do, despite very, very, I say very public, but like who actually reads, but like things that are in the news that, or that just don't meet the ethical like smell test. If you've continued to do those in spite of all signs pointing to the fact that you shouldn't, you'll still probably get a notice from them that says, hey, like, we got our eye on you, please stop.
The notice from who, FTC?
FTC.
Oh, not like Facebook and Meta and everybody.
You may get one from them as well. Because they have their own set of ethical standards, but some of that is because they are, to some extent, and they have great lobbyists. This came up with the reviews too, but if they're a platform that allows some of that to happen and doesn't take it down, they can be held liable. They've managed to, it's not just Facebook, it's really any kind of third-party platform sites. And I get it, because you can't enforce every single thing, but whether it comes to bad reviews that are defamatory, or things that are clearly violations of well-held.
Oh, yeah, like Amazon reviews. I had to return something. And
Yeah.
I'm like, it said it worked, but it didn't.
Yeah. So,
Okay, we'll return it.
but they have some degree of accountability to at least hear those complaints. And the hard part is they say, we hear them, we have a source to hear them, but if it's in any way not cut and dried, we're leaving that up to y'all. So, and that really comes into play with trademarks and copyright and defamation and reviews, because so much of that, unless you have something registered, or if it's clear defamation where it's, there's no way it could be possibly true, then they're like, okay, we have a channel for this to go through, and we've allowed you to do that, but like, and that's why a lot of times you'll see you submit it, they get a chance to respond, you respond, they respond, and like nothing ever really happens because they have liability if they take it down, and it shouldn't be taken down, but they also don't have a lot of accountability unless it's blatantly a violation of some kind of law or regulation. So it can be super challenging in that instance, but they do have some accountability, which is why they put some of these ethical guidelines in place and their content guidelines, and will take stuff down at their own discretion if they feel like it, even if it's wrong. And you don't really have a lot of means of going after them for that, unfortunately. But that's kind of at least the basis, they say, that they have some of these policies in place, is so they have the discretion to moderate their platforms. And the hard part about that too is it's not a public government platform. It's a private company, so they don't have to follow free speech laws or anything like that. You're essentially just like any other private business that you're participating in, unless it's discriminatory or violates certain laws that every business can't do, then they can take content down and moderate it as they see fit. But they are accountable in some ways. And back to your question, I have in my notes where there was a case that they said payment is always a material connection, if that helps at all. So she said what actually defines like what's a material connection, and when do you disclose, how do you know like what level of relationship between you and somebody that is a part of your advertisement or endorsing something do you disclose, like how do you know? And they have said payment in any form is definitely close enough to disclose. It's in some way, and I would say any kind of in-kind payment. I would say anything that substitutes. It's not necessarily just monetary exchange. It's payment in any form that would probably qualify. I'm going to try to not skip, but I'm going to try to get through some of these quicker because I realize we're running out of time. But just one example from the actually using your products is that the FTC sued Google and iHeartMedia, so they don't always get away with everything. When there were some DJs that said they had used a certain phone, none of them had ever used the phone, and they just got paid to endorse it. It was the Google Pixel 4, and they talked about how great they were, and they hyped them up, and they posted a bunch of stuff with them. Same with Fire Festival, if you've heard about that. A ton of the people who said, oh, I'm going to this, can't wait. I think only one of those actually even had a ticket to go. The rest of them never had any plan to be a part of it, but they were hyping it up, and a couple of them disclosed, but most of them didn't. They all got fined to some degree. But the Google iHeartMedia was a $9.4 million settlement.
So Google got fined, but did the person who lied about it saying that they used it, did they get fined as well, or is it just the corporation?
So that kind of goes back to, yeah, that's a good question. I haven't read the case in depth, but I can look at it. But I would guess most of the time when you have any kind of influencer contract with the company, there's some indemnity clause in it. And I always try to fight for, if I'm on the influencer side of things, to say, well, I guess if you're the company, you want the influencer to pay you back for any kind of claims or harm that comes to the company based on what you've done and the contract that your actions, anything that's involved with the work that you've done for them. But if you're the influencer, you are like, why would I pay your $9.4 million when you only paid me $500 to do this? So I think it depends on, in a lot of cases, how much that person was paid to actually be a part of that, and how closely they were to the planning and how much control they had over, how they were able to create that content and to advertise it in their own way versus what they were told to do by the brand. But I usually try to limit it to whatever if I'm on the influencer side, I always try to limit it to whatever that they were paid at least. So, I mean, that way, the worst case scenario, you possibly have to indemnify, like the $500 that you were paid to in exchange, or maybe the $25,000 that you were paid. I mean, I have one client who works with different brands, and she was paid $25,000 by Square for 2 15-second ads. But those ads had some debatably third-party trademarks and some stuff that was, she's a graphic design, without going into confidentiality, but there were some designs in it that possibly could have gotten the brands that she works with sued. And so we've had to negotiate that some, because she's like, you asked me to do this design, and that's technically somebody else's art that I'm expanding on a little bit. And if you get sued by them and I indemnify you, who knows how much that could be in a lawsuit. So you always try to, if you're, whatever side you're on, you're always trying to get somebody else to pay for whatever lawsuits come up, at least in part, so that their portion is covered, or whatever involvement that you all had, somebody's covering different parts of it. It's not all just on one party. But who knows? I mean, again, technically, it usually falls on the business side, because they generally have more control over the means, like the content, how it's put out there. So I don't know, it's a good question though. But just remember, as the business, it's definitely an obligation, more likely of yours, to make sure that those things are thought about.
Before you pass this page, I have a question.
Sure.
So if I give away some of my service today, and I say, well, I'm only asking you to scan this QRC to leave me a review, am I doing something illegal?
No, I mean, I think that's a good question. If they're not really receiving anything in return, then I think the question too is where are you asking them to give you a review? And can you even...
Oh, on the Google.
Yeah, I mean, really you don't have any control over designating that from somebody that you didn't ask, who decided to wake up today and write you one, right? I mean, Google just ranks them on its own.
Well, I just took on a business a few months ago, and I have a new address, a different name and everything, but Google decides to leave all the negative reviews that this place had prior on my Google page.
Oh, that's...
And there's no human, I can't get rid of them, so I've taken a 2.9 review. The only way it can go up is if everybody starts reviewing. So this is a whole new game for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think I do. Oh, sure.
So, sorry, I have to ask, is it the same business? Did you buy the business?
About the business itself,
Yeah. You can't do anything about reviews.
I cannot. Oh, yeah, and it's a different address and everything.
You can put a description on it though.
I
You
did.
can, yeah.
I did, and I keep asking Google to change, and I had to do a Google verify. I've never done this before, so there's nothing I can do about the
We have
old.
a client that's in a similar situation, and they're stuck at 4.4, and they have 600 reviews,
Wow.
and
That-
they can't do anything about it. It's new ownership.
Wow.
So actually
Same
here,
name.
Google's the one that's in control.
4.4 is the new 5.
That's interesting.
So interesting thing.
Okay, so I
Yeah, you
understand.
can ask for reviews, you just can't incentivize it.
Yeah.
If Google catches wind that you incentivized it, they'll remove the review.
Yeah. And I think that is kind of the heart of it is, I mean, along with the fact that you really don't have a way to control, at least in that forum, which ones are asked for versus which ones are not asked for, but they've put in a mechanism to
Right.
try to control that.
Well, if you think about it, you can only leave a review if you have a Google account, right? So if you send an e-blast out to 1,000 people on your list saying, hey, give us a review, we'll take $50 off of your next order.
Oh,
Google
yes.
sees that, they know.
No, people are walking in and going, wow, we can see a difference, wow. And I'm like, oh, here. here's
Yeah.
the QRC.
And I think that's good in a way. I mean, because I think, again, the heart of it is, and I think it's hard too, because, being a new business myself, I always tell people I was the wizard behind the curtain for a bunch of years where my name was not really on a lot of things because I was always delegating things or working for my boss's clients. And, the clients that I worked for, maybe they would write a review, but I was really, my name wasn't really out there for a long time. So you're always thinking about how do I mean, most people only go write a review if they have a really great experience or a really terrible experience. But you're like, I would like some some just experience will be fine as long, I mean, hopefully positive, but I mean, it does take somebody, usually some kind of incentive to go above and beyond
Sue Google?
and write a review. I mean, and I know how challenging it is. I wonder if you change your business name slightly, like, is it an LLC or is it
Oh, yeah.
like, I wonder if you could change if you could like sell the assets, transfer them to like an actual new company, would it be considered a new business? I don't know.
It's,
Like,
I went down this rabbit hole with this client.
Did you?
Yeah, let me give you my card.
yeah, no, I'm curious. I would love your card too, because I have that conflict sometimes, and I'm like, I have done all the things I can do to like legally help you, and I had to fight with him too, because when you're a lawyer, you don't have to get a business license because you pay for a license as well as you pay for your state license and a couple different things. So you don't have to get a regular business license. And they wanted my business license when I was registering. And I'm like, here's the statute. Here's like, but there's not a lot of flexibility there. But I think the good part about that is you're not going to be held accountable for not prioritizing the reviews that you might get some taken down, but the burden is not on you to differentiate those if they don't catch you. Sure.
So I think a common phenomenon that we see nowadays is cancel culture. Are there any legalities that comes with, say, a business is under fire for controversy, and it garners a lot of attention? A lot of times people will leave bad reviews either on the person that's being targeted or the business that's being targeted, but they're not connected actual consumers. They're just kind of, I guess, just
Unrelated parties. Yeah.
in that way. So are there any legalities with that? Like, what would you recommend a business like that do if in that case without these bad reviews?
It's super challenging, and I think he could probably speak to that too, because there are laws as far as defamation, and it kind of is the other side of the coin as far as people doing endorsements and advertising, for you that have actually been your customer. The law works the other way too, that if they aren't actually your customer, a lot of times you can get in touch with the platform, and it may be slow, and also depending on how many there are and how blatantly like not your customer they are. But there are mechanisms in place where you're supposed to be able to reach out and say, this person was not my customer, or this person was a disgruntled employee that like was fired. And I know like Yelp is pretty good about that. What's another one? Groupon is pretty good about that. Google to some extent. And some of it is just being persistent. I mean, some of it, if it's any kind of factual situation where they are actually a customer, those are very hard to get taken down because of free speech and them erring on the side of we want people to have transparency about your business. And that's why it is so difficult, even if you change, because they don't want businesses to be able to change their names and just like have a 5-star review again. But I can see how that would also play out badly. But on the other side of things, I mean, like there usually is a means if you just bug them enough. And that's the hard part, is just to continually reach out to multiple people, go through, find out what the official process is, but also just be persistent and follow up and provide as much evidence as you can that this person was, and it's hard to provide evidence that they're not a customer, but if they are some kind of former employee or whatever, then that can be helpful. But yes, that you should be able to get taken down. I say should because it's a matter of just getting in touch with the right person and having them listen to you and then actually following through. But and you can also sue for defamation. You can send them cease and desist letter. That's usually expensive and not worth your time unless you just have a copy and you want to like try to scare them into complying. But that can be effective sometimes too, if that helps. So, sure.
Sort of on the same note, but on your own social media, all the channels that you as a business manage yourself? If you are a government agency or have a government affiliation, can you monitor all your comments and remove anything negative without causing a problem, or do you have to leave everything up?
You don't have to leave it. I would advise you to remove as little as possible. I know that's a challenging place to be, and I think it depends on whether the heart of the comment is untrue and unfounded without any basis, or whether it could actually be a valid complaint, even if it's not something that you want to hear. And at the end of the day, I mean, I would say there's an argument for you having some control over your own pages and your own, space and posts. But I think number one, it erodes your consumer trust if it becomes known and understood that the negative comments get taken down. I think it also does probably rise to a level, if you delete all the negative comments, of being deceptive or misleading, if you just only leave the good ones. And so I think it just kind of depends on the content of what's being said. But I don't know. I feel like almost any business that's been around for long enough, or any government agency, is going to have some degree of people who are unsatisfied. And that is, most people understand that. Most people expect it. They don't take it too negatively. But I think if it's blatantly untrue, or if it's in some way offensive, or, I think there are certain standards to where if it's outrageous and going to cause drama, and that's the intention of it, those are the kind of things that you could take down and have a basis for being able to take down, but not just, I don't like this and it doesn't paint me in a good light.
So one step from there, if you have certain people who comment all the time that are very negative and trying to stir things up, can you
Trolls.
block those people?
You're talking about trolls.
Yeah, can you block those people from commenting on your pages?
And can we block them from Blunt County? Narrative speaks out.
I mean, I would say yes to a degree, because I feel like it's different to, as long as it's not, nobody has a right to post on Facebook or any other platform, and that's why Facebook can take it down. And I think, there is a level of enjoyment and the maintaining community, and it's better to block them than to take down stuff they've already said. I feel like once they've said it and it's valid, that's kind of like you're editing the narrative versus just not allowing them to participate either. And I would have, and that's part of, I don't know if we're going to get to this, clearly not, but I mean, that's why I highly, highly recommend, and I'll skip to the crux of this, is implementing some kind of social media policy for your company, for your employees, for people who post on it, just so that you can point to something and say, this is not discriminatory against you specifically, it's because you have violated this thing. And whether that is on any, social media, or whether it's an employee on their own social media, just having a guideline that applies to everyone across the board is really helpful in, number one, helping you have some kind of process to vet your own social media posts and to make sure there's consistency to represent your brand. But number two, that way no one can say, I'm specifically being singled out and, my feelings are hurt and you're picking on me. It's like, no, we have this policy, you violated it, so you can no longer be a part of this community anymore. Or
I noticed on Facebook a lot of times when you join groups, they want you to see their rules and regulations, and you have to agree to that.
Yes.
And if you violate them, then that's when
yes.
corrective action could happen.
Yeah.
There's a lot of groups are doing that.
That's really helpful, because again, you can just say, this is an across the board policy we have. It's not personal.
It's not singling out.
I mean, it is personal, but it's not. And I think that can be helpful in just defensive moves to keep you from having to fight about it and put you on the defensive as, somebody tries to make themselves a victim. And it's always those people who are the people who are making the crazy inflammatory posts. So, I wish I had more. I'm going to have to come back. I'm typically not a public speaker. This is one of my first forays into public speaking in a while, and my mom's a teacher. I'm not. So thank you for just indulging me. And sorry that we didn't get through everything. Maybe it was too ambitious because it's a lot to tackle. So I would love to come back sometime. I would love to get your questions. I'll send out these slides to whoever so that they can send them to you. That has my contact information. And so there's some stuff that we didn't get to as far as your policies, as far as copyright and trademark. And then if you have other questions that I could be helpful to answer the next go round or in person or a meeting or whatever, reach out and I'm happy to try to do that or figure out a more focused presentation next time that would be on a specific topic rather than trying to cover it all in an hour and a half. But thank you again just so much for